Good evening, everyone. Did you hear me? Joe, am I on? Okay. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Now, come on, it usually takes 3 times. Good evening, everyone. We have some rowdy people in the back. Hold on. Hello, my name is Jill Berry. I'm the executive director here at Morven, and I'm delighted you are here today. This is by far one of my favorite lecture series we do, the Grand Homes and Gardens lecture series. This year's theme is Trailblazers and Trendsetters. And I have to read this because Greer wrote up such a lovely definition of it. We are exploring the people and spaces who cultivated new opportunities and inspired breakthrough trends for future generations of landscape architects, designers, entrepreneurs, and horticulturalists. Today, these places continue the work of preserving historic and natural landscapes for public benefit and community engagement. So what better reason to get together other than we're going to look at beautiful homes and beautiful gardens on a cold, rainy day. So we are very excited to have as our series sponsor, so you will see them hopefully 4 times if you bought the series subscription, is Hilton's Princeton. And I'd like to welcome Nick Hilton. Would you like to say a few words?
No. Hi. I'm Nick Hilton, if you don't know, you probably don't. Anyway, have no idea what to say, except that I'm honored. We were honored, Jennifer and I and Catherine, our daughter, who run the store, are honored to be able to do this, to be able to support Morven. I have to admit to you that I have been a stranger, although I've lived in Princeton, or within 5 miles of here, for 40 odd years. I don't know that much about Morven. I don't know that much about what you do, and I thought, gee, what a nice opportunity to be able to sponsor something and learn something. And I like the idea of tradition and trailblazers and trendsetters. That kind of resonates with me. And I saw that this particular lecture, we call it a lecture program, is about a guy named Wright. And I thought, well, it's got to be Frank Lloyd Wright, but it's not. So I'm used to being confused with a Hilton. That's all. I could really identify with not being the person that they thought they were getting in touch with, you know. Do you have any rooms? We need a room. Anyway, I hope you enjoy yourselves, and thank you for coming. And I guess
we'll see you next week.
See you next week.
Thank you, Nick. And he doesn't have room, but he has beautiful, beautiful clothes. Our lecture series for tonight is David Shore and Grant Wagner of Callaway, Henderson, Sotheby's International Realty. And if you know anything about the mid-century modern real estate in town, I hope you know these guys. So, Grant and David.
We don't want to say a whole lot either. We just want to get on to the topic tonight. But a couple of things that you should know about us is that we are real estate agents who really enjoy design. We talk about design every day. We talk about things that we've seen on the internet and postings and gardens, especially at this time of year, something else to look at besides the gray New Jersey we have.
Mid-century modern is mostly our favorite, which is why we were so excited to sponsor Manitoga. So we hope you enjoy, basically.
And we brought some goodies to give away. We thought that while we're going to have beautiful pictures of the property they're talking about, part of what fueled their ability to have this great property are some of the products that Mary and Russel Wright made. And I remember growing up with some of them and thought, well, that would be fun to have some to give away. So I first went home to see if I could find any, but someone else already claimed them. So we went and got some others, and you all were asked to put your name in a bucket when you came in here. And we're giving away several pieces that we hope that you'll enjoy taking home. Oh, All right.
Right. If you have signed in, you are in the bucket.
See how smooth they do things here? So smoothly. So with that, do you have anything else you want to add?
That's it. But we hope you enjoy and win a piece.
Yes.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you. We don't often have parts of the collection we can give away, so thank you. And that will be after the Q&A, and that's one of the benefits of being in person here at the lecture, so thank you for that. We do have about the same amount of people that are in the room also on Zoom, so we welcome you. Manitoga is the first mid-century modern home featured in the Grand Homes and Gardens series. And the Wrights shape modern American design, and Manitoga exemplifies their trend-setting aesthetic. So that's going back to the trendsetters and trailblazers. But I also want to remind you that next week, we also have Villa Lawara, which is a Gilded Age estate of self-made millionaire and African-American beauty entrepreneur, Madam C.J. Walker. And hopefully you've watched the Netflix special, Self-Made. It's that house. So I hope you come back. And that's next week's lecture is sponsored by Capital Health. So with that, I will welcome Greer to officially welcome Vivian. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jill, and thank you to our wonderful sponsors for this evening's program. My name is Greer Luce. I am the Curator of Education and Public Programs here at Morven, and it's my pleasure to introduce tonight's speaker, Vivian Linares. Vivian Linares is the Director of Collections and Historic Preservation at Manitoga, the Russel Wright Design Center, where she has worked for over 20 years and has been instrumental in Manitoga's emergence as an important mid-century modernist cultural site. During this time, she helped guide Manitoga's designation as a National Historic Landmark, a World Monuments Fund Watch site, and was part of the project team for the award-winning Russel and Mary Wright Design Center at Manitoga. She oversees a collection of over 2,500 of the product designs of Mary and Russel Wright, a furnishing collection for Wright's home and studio, document archives, and a photography collection. And she helps guide historic preservation initiatives for the historic structures. So please join me in welcoming Vivian.
Thank you, Greer. Joe? It is my great pleasure to be here today to introduce you to Manitoga, the home, studio, and 75-acre woodland garden of 20th century industrial designer Russel Wright. This is what it will look like in about 10 weeks. I can't wait. Our visitors often remark that they have discovered a hidden treasure, and I still feel that way so many years that I've been there. It just keeps unfolding in startling ways. I understand why Wright named it Manitoga, which means place of great spirit in the Algonquin language. The story of Manitoga cannot be told. Bear with me while I get used to this. The story of Manitoga cannot be told without first telling the story of Russel and Mary Wright and how they brought modern living to millions of Americans at mid-century through their elegant and affordable designs for the home. They were the very definition of trailblazers and trendsetters. Russel was born in Lebanon, Ohio in 1904 to Quaker family, showed an interest in art at an early age. To please his father, a judge, Wright agreed to prepare for a law career at Princeton, his father's alma mater. But first, he spent a year in New York City studying painting, then sculpture at the Art Students League. Later, as a Princeton student, he clearly preferred campus plays to academics. He was in the Triangle Club to design scenery and joined Theater in Time, where his talents were evident. Not surprisingly, he dropped out in 1923, just 100 years ago, to pursue a career in theatrical set design in New York City. There, he worked with the designer Norman Belgettis, eventually landing in Rochester, New York, in regional theater, working with the director George Cukor. Mary Small Einstein was born and raised in New York City to a prosperous family of textile manufacturers and merchants. Her first tour of Europe at age 15 marked the beginning of extensive travels. She even mingled in literary circles in Paris, where style columns singled her out as a woman of great beauty and charm. As a sophisticated young woman working in New York City, she illustrated books and designed book covers. Her exquisite ink drawings, shown here from the 1920s, showed delicacy, artistry, and imagination. In search of artistic growth, she decided to attend the Maverick Art Colony in Woodstock, New York, in the summer of 1927. And it was at the Maverick Art Colony, the wonderfully bohemian summer gathering of artists, actors, writers, and musicians, where Mary and Russell met during the summer of 1927. Russell was designing sets and directing at the Maverick Theater, and Mary was studying sculpture with the avant-garde artist Alexander Archipenko. It was within this intensely creative atmosphere they fell in love and married within months in the fall of 1927. When they made the move to New York City in 1929, it was Mary who sparked the idea for designing, creating, and marketing intriguing objects for the home. She thought it possible and profitable, and they needed an income. With a keen sense of marketing and a winning personality, she found an enthusiastic audience for a series of surrealist-inspired circus animals, see them there, in upscale New York gift shops. This was their very first commercial success. They were at once sculptural, imaginative, and functional. Many served as bookends. And they recalled the props Russell once made at the Maverick Theater. This was the beginning of a truly remarkable creative partnership. Russell, as a prolific designer of objects for the home, and Mary's genius for packaging a modernist lifestyle for the American public with a distinctly American sensibility. These and other elegant metal objects paved the way for their next big act: mass-produced accessories in spun aluminum that appealed to the upper middle class in the Depression era. There was even a baby grand piano designed for the Wurlitzer Company. Then came wooden serving accessories with warm, natural, organic shapes called Oceana. This was their first product that reflected nature so directly. Their modern living furniture line made it really big. Launched in 1935, there was an entire 9-room modern maple house at Macy's, a first on a mass market basis. Next came a defining moment in their career: the introduction of American modern tableware, some of which are out there in the hallway and going to be raffled or given away later today. Widely considered the best-selling tableware ever, having sold reportedly over 250 million pieces, which may be a little bit of an exaggeration. In both shape and color, the style was revolutionary. Simple, organic shapes with unusual colors, at once saturated and restrained: seafoam blue, granite gray, chartreuse curry, bean brown. The Wrights also introduced many marketing innovations. His was the first designer signature to accompany products. They introduced the concept of open stock and the starter set, and much, much more. Overall, the breadth of their design output is staggering, as was their impact on everyday life. Here are just a few samples from that time, some of which you may recognize. Mary also introduced some designs of her own, including the ceramic pieces on the bottom. They were called her Country Gardens line. Then in 1950, their popularity soared even higher with their Guide to Easier Living, a bestseller that promoted a post-war American lifestyle that was informal and elegant. Notice there, cleanup can even be a part of the evening's pleasure if managed properly. And along the way, they found their muse. As an antidote to the pressures of business, fame, and the city, the Wrights sought an escape in nature. In 1942, just a few years after the stunning success of American modern tableware, they found their place in Garrison, New York, a small hamlet about 100 miles north of New York City, in the Hudson Highlands. It was not too far, not too close, just right. Yet an unlikely choice. A 79-acre property with a harsh industrial past as King's Quarry. Here it is pictured circa 1904. At the center of the image, you can see the outline of the central quarry, which over time became the centerpiece of Manitoga. The land was completely devastated, overgrown with brambles and vines and dense second growth forest. But the Wrights found the property full of possibility. The raw beauty of the land and its great potential appealed to them with their designer's eyes. Here, they were quietly trendsetters in nurturing the land ravaged by industry, and quite literally trailblazers. In the end, Wright would design and create over 2 miles of choreographed woodland paths throughout the property. Over the years, the site unfolded as a canvas for their imagination. Their design innovations continued, and they spent as much time as possible in their country retreat, envisioning their future home. In 1950, they adopted their daughter, Anne, and just 2 years later, tragically, Mary Wright died of cancer at the age of 47. With the loss of his wife and brilliant business partner, Russell turned to nature for comfort and inspiration and became focused on creating a home for himself and his daughter. Manitoga was a project that would consume him for 35 years and become what he felt was his greatest achievement. He passionately worked to create a total environment where every detail was deliberate, much like a set design, and mostly with his own hands. But when he needed help, he hired workers and had an old AT&T truck to help him with the bigger tasks, like moving massive boulders. In 1961, after he built his home, Dragon Rock, Wright compiled his Garrison slide lecture. He gathered friends and acquaintances in his living room, loaded the carousel, pulled down a large built-in screen, it's still there, for an evening of conversation. His original text is intact, but the images, mostly archival, have been reconstructed. His own words tell the story best, and I've selected a few excerpts to share. Let me take a sip of water. It begins. As the assembly line encroaches more and more in our working life, crowding out individual creative expression, the need for a home in which we can realize ourselves as individuals becomes increasingly urgent. My own experimental and personal country home is intended as an experiment and a demonstration that contemporary design can create from old and new materials a home highly individual, capable of a variety of moods. Dragon Rock is an exaggerated demonstration of how individual a house can be. The first consideration in building, I believe, should be the family. Let us briefly consider mine. I must first speak of Mary, who died 8 years ago, because for many years she looked for the land and helped plan the house with me. Then there was Anne, who wasn't around at the time of the original planning, and we had to imagine what a little girl would need to grow up in. And then there was me. I filled out a 300-question test. It concluded, do not employ. This person could only be a gardener. The test did truly evaluate my interests. I am more interested in nature than any other subject. To determine what was most important to us, Mary and I began 22 years ago making a list of our interests. Mary wanted swimming most. I dreamed of a view of the Hudson. So we hunted up and down both sides of the Hudson River, and I bought on the side of a mountain 79 acres of land which had been worked as a quarry 100 years before, and the land contained 3 abandoned quarry pits and a stream. I began designing almost immediately, making paths, learning the shape of the land, cutting vistas and views, until at the top of my land, I got this view. I built a dam across an old quarry pit and changed the course of a small brook to run into the old quarry, thus making a waterfall. We set up a small shack for bathing and another shack on one of the cliffs. You can see it there. It was in this shack that I did most of my drawings for the various designs and sketches that went on for many years. My final plans were given to an architect's office, Levitt, Henschel, and Kawai. The interior drawings were made by me and my staff. Here is the final plan. My aim was to have this unusual piece of land be the most important part of the whole project. In other words, I did not want the house to dominate the land. Here are some of the natural materials which are used in the house. On the left, lumber in various conditions: leather, fir, stone, birch bark, copper. Here are a few of the man-made materials used in the house: fiberglass, formica, foam rubber, metal foil, and styrofoam. Color studies were made for both winter and summer schemes. I wanted it to be cool and refreshing in the summer and warm and snug in the winter. In many ways, the house is a study both in blending and contrasting. Rocks, boulders, and even trees are brought into the house. The work began with preparing the site. We would lift boulders up and out of the quarry to place them around the house. In the main room of the living room, in the main portion of the living room, I have made this room like a cave. The stone floor in the lower area around the fireplace continues at the top of the cliff, which forms the terrace outside. Here is the entrance to my section, the studio building, approached by the portico. And here he is. At the other end of the building, you can look down from outside into my room, which contains a very large L-shaped drafting desk, a rocking chair from my hometown, Lebanon, Ohio, pieces of sculpture from Cambodia, objects from China, and other travels. And that's the end of Russel's slide talk. This is very much an excerpt. It's extremely long and detailed. So you may have noted that in his slide talk, he said that he took his plans to an architectural firm. This is architect David Levitt, who I interviewed in 2007 prior to his death in 2013. He's pictured here on one of the terraces at Dragon Rock. In the 1950s, Wright had taken on an assignment for the State Department to survey handicraft industries in Asia for trade potential and became enamored of Japanese customs and aesthetics. Levitt had worked extensively in Japan as an architect, and when his Japanese-inspired apartment was featured in the New York Times, Wright saw it, quickly interviewed David Levitt, and hired him on the spot. Levitt would be credited as architect of Dragon Rock and Wright as interior designer. And if you've wondered where the name Dragon Rock came from, Annie Wright, as a child, thought that the rock formation on this granite wall of the quarry resembled a dragon sipping water. Then Dragon Rock became known as a wonderful house to live in, when Life magazine sent Farrell Graham on assignment there. Russel Wright had become a household name, but little was known about Dragon Rock, his intensely personal home. Graham must have delighted in the shoot. He produced a lavish spread and took many wonderful photos beyond those published, and they beautifully capture everyday life at Dragon Rock. And yes, it was an enchanted world in the woods. That's the first page of the spread. And many things were very simple about it. The red curtains are actually red ribbons that are stapled to cardboard. Wright was still the master of dramatic effect all throughout Manitoga, the landscape and in his house. In his slide talk, Wright says the fireplace was the burning heart of the home. And in this image, with the massive organic shaped fireplace, it is just that. This is Anne Wright with friends in the kitchen at Dragon Rock. The kitchen is a model of efficiency with the latest appliances, a movable shelf that goes up and down, and drawers that can be accessed on both sides of the cabinet. That's her nanny there. Those are a group of friends. And Manitoga is a winter wonderland. Here, with ice skating, frozen waterfall, the perfect site for a snowball fight. The red ribbon curtains, again, seen there, form an intended warm contrast with the white snow. And here's the winter view across the quarry. You can see clearly how the house and studio, connected by the pergola, are nestled into the quarry ledge. The view is different in the summer when you can barely see the structures. They're so hidden. This is Diana Boyce, Annie Wright's English nanny, and the family's poodle, Turk, in the foreground. The blue plastic dome with fiberglass was the summer chandelier, and in winter they used one of wrought iron lit by candles. Here we see Wright and his friend, the designer on the left, and the designer Jacqueline or Larson. I think they just had coffee and cigarettes. And on the right, a more formal dinner scene is under the winter chandelier. And these are all pictures taken by Farrell Graham with the Life magazine shoot. By 1965, Wright lived at Manitoga full-time, and his industrial design career came to an end. But boundless creativity was alive and well at Manitoga, and he found companionship with Joe Chapman, his partner later in life. He worked with great passion, creativity, and ecological sensitivity on his landscape, where each path offers a different experience depending on the time of day and season. He searched out trails used by deer, rabbits, and dogs because he observed that they usually follow the contour of the property. This once devastated land appeared so natural that the question was always, how did you ever find such a beautiful spot? And an exceptionally lovely landscape feature is Mary's Meadow, named in memory of Mary Wright. Now, nearly 50 years ago, Wright welcomed the public to experience nature through the Feel Nature and Know Nature tours. There's a map there that shows you, it's a trail map that we give to the public just to show you the extent of his trail work there, the paths that he carved out. His desire to bring nature and the arts to people deepened through his work with the National Park Service, where in 1968 he developed a long-running Summer in the Parks program in Washington, D.C. Wright also brought the performing arts to Manitoga. There were dancers on the Waterfall Bridge for a Diwali festival, classical music in the meadow, and a performance by choreographer Simone Forti, shown here, and these are just some examples. The setting is incomparable for outdoor performance. In 1976, Russel Wright died at the age of 72. The reported cause of death was a heart attack, but he had also been diagnosed with cancer and died shortly afterward. He willed the property to the Nature Conservancy, and the property was later taken over by the organization Manitoga, founded to carry forth Wright's creative legacy. As he wished, Manitoga, the place, is shared with the public as a vibrant demonstration of creative living in harmony with nature. In 2001, I was hired for a 4-month project and never left. Perfect timing. Manitoga had acquired Anne Wright's tenancy rights to Dragon Rock, opening up huge possibilities. Urgent restoration work began, public tours were started. Nearly a decade ago, just as Wright did in his lifetime, Manitoga brought back the performing arts and welcomed visual artists and designers as part of an annual art and design residency program. The quarry walls once again resound with music and dance. What we're seeing here is a commissioned piece by composer Ben Neal entitled Manitoga for Brass Quintet. We also had Flamenco y Sol performing flamenco as part of a Palmas. The piece was called Palmas, a sound installation by artist Melissa McGill. Then we see Resonance and Resemblance, a site-specific piece by composer Suzanne Thorpe, was performed on kayaks floating on the quarry pool. It was a very meditative, beautiful piece. Here we see percussionist Jeff Haynes. He brought in an eclectic ensemble of musicians for an afternoon called United in Nature. Composer and philosopher David Rothenberg performed pond music at Lost Pond, which incorporated actual sounds of underwater pond life. Choreographer Ivy Baldwin's piece Quarry used the site as a stage, including the roof of the house. Installations include Stephen Telaznik's work of aquatic sculpture floating on the quarry pool sanctuary. And last summer was a stunning installation, including a bladder chandelier by the Italian design duo Forma Fantasma. This is only a sampling of the extraordinary offerings, with more to come, but the consistent thread is a dialogue with Wright's legacy. And exactly a decade ago, Manitoga's leadership embraced the idea that the Wright's product design legacy must be part of Manitoga. The goal was to offer an integrated picture, architecture, design, and landscape. We went on to acquire notable product donations from several important and generous collectors with the idea of the Russel and Mary Wright Design Gallery at Manitoga took hold. With lead funding from the Henry Luce Foundation and an extraordinary project team, the Design Gallery opened to the public in 2021 to critical acclaim, including 6 awards for excellence in design. Now, the interplay between the Wright's design career and Manitoga is on full view. The gallery looks onto a terrace, the quarry pool in view and beyond. For example, white clover that grows on the slopes at Manitoga inspired Wright's Harker line on the bottom. Throughout the house, there are many, many other connections. In the exquisite acrylic panels in Anne Wright's bathroom, you see plants and butterflies encased in plastic. Just as real jade leaves are part of Wright's Ming Flare, Ming lace, and plastics were innovations in Wright's incredibly popular residential line on the right. Metals, plastics, glass, and Asian influences are everywhere. These exquisite details in the house and studio linger in the imagination long after you leave the site. Much of what our visitors see today in the house and studio has been thoughtfully restored, including the green roofs the studio, the house windows and doors. Most recently, Wright's kitchen, complete with 1960s appliances. And many landscape restorations have taken place as well. My parting image to you is a very special one. This is Wright's waterfall that flows into the quarry pool. About a year or so ago, we learned that the waterfall was structurally at risk, that years of severe weather and erosion had taken its toll. After much discussion and study, we brought in master trail planner Peter Jensen to lead the effort along with our landscape staff. He and his crew worked on it for 2 months last fall into winter, using simple pulley techniques and sheer strength, much the way Wright did in his lifetime. They stabilized and restored the waterfall to its former glory. This does not do it justice. This is just a part of it. It's impossible to take a video is the only thing that does it, that can convey. The majestic 30-foot waterfall symbolizes Wright's enduring vision for Manitoga and our commitment to making sure it is preserved and celebrated for generations to come. Please come and visit and see for yourself. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think you might want to stay up here for a few questions. Okay. Do we have any questions in the room? Okay.
She is very much involved. She's a founding member of Manitoga, and she is currently on the board of directors. And very much involved with it. Yeah, an incredible resource for us. Yes. The size is about, I mean, square footage wise, it's the entire thing is about 3,000 square feet. It's not that big. It's kind of a small, it's spread out and it has many different levels, but it's actually kind of compact by today's standards. Yes.
Could you say a little more about the green roof?
Yeah. It
What
was,
are the green components and what are the issues with the green?
there were a lot of issues. So there was a lot of water infiltration from them. There are a lot of problems that he had in his lifetime. He encouraged that growth. It was very visionary. It was very forward thinking to have them at that time. And over time, they deteriorated all this. So in some years ago, when we decided to restore them, we used state-of-the-art materials this time around to make sure that they were, that they had the appearance of the green roofs, but that they were using modern materials so that it was, so that those problems wouldn't happen again. So we had landscape architects, people. The research was done to have the kind of vegetation that would thrive on that, with shallow roots, things like that. So very well thought out, and they're thriving. The studio in particular, it looks like a carpet, like a thick carpet. And so they're wonderful, and they actually absorb a lot of rainfall and they insulate. We're very happy with the way they've turned out.
I was wondering, how long was that house uninhabited and, say, in decay until it was restored?
Well, so it was never uninhabited. Anne Wright lived there for an extended period of time until 2001. Wright died in 1976, and then Anne Wright took it over. There was a short time where there were some subtenants there, but it was occupied all that time. But the problems of a house like that, the way it's set into the quarry, it caused a lot of problems with water infiltration, deterioration, things like that. So it's just over time, it was never not inhabited. It just developed many, many issues. Yeah.
Water, always a problem. Nick,
Are the ceramic, are the housewares in production anymore? Is that?
That's a good question. Anne Wright has had the rights to the products. And yes, Bauer Pottery in California they have been reissued over the years. There have been different places. Oneida had reissued some a while back, in like 2002, and a couple of other companies took on different. The spun aluminums was reissued for a while. This come and gone, but currently Bauer Pottery in California does reissued American Modern.
Did the collection come in the house?
the collection
Which
come at the
collection?
house?
Some pieces did, some pieces we've had to reacquire. It's just not, things scattered over the years or whatever. I think it's pretty common, things get refurnishing has had to take place.
Anybody online asking any questions? Sorry. While Greer checks, anything else in the room? Yes, back there.
Thank you. This is such a fabulous presentation.
Thank you.
In the mid-'80s, I was in graduate school at Harvard, and Michael Van Valkenburg was one of our teachers, and we went down to Dragon's Rock. And what's extraordinary from a landscape architect's perspective is we created what we call a forest garden.
Yes, that's another term that's used for it.
Gosh, anything, but the trees he put in, it's all, it's native.
He used
He couldn't recreate this. It's just, extraordinary. And I find it interesting that, how much nature meant to him after being, very much in the midst of New York and production. But what my question also is sort of, one thing that he was involved in was this, plastic that was really good. It was this durable plastic. Well, I'm not using the wrong word, but what we know today with the kind of plastic, the material we have now is not at all like as his industrial design career. And he's using this very durable material. Can you say anything about that?
About his use of plastics?
Well, as one of the early industrial designers, he was using a material that had integrity in terms of not being wasteful. It was a contemporary material that. I feel like in industrial production isn't using the kind of materials that he was using that were.
Well, he was very forward-thinking with his material, very experimental. He tried many different things. He was not afraid of trying new things and incorporating in the house. A lot of the materials in the house are very experimental, and that drove him to do that. He was driven to do that. He loved the idea of so Manitoga, in effect, is really a natural and man-made environment. It's a synthesis. It's a perfect synthesis of that. Of course, we didn't know at the time how these things will hold up over time. Plastics do deteriorate. They're sensitive to light, and they just get brittle and decompose.
Greer has something online.
I do. So I have a question from Joel Studebaker. Has the vegetation on the green roof evolved? Do you expect it to reach an equilibrium point?
Well,
Thanks, and we will visit.
I hope they do. That's a better question for our landscape staff. But visually, it really is thriving, and it's beautiful. And they're on it. If anything needs to be adjusted or whatever, it gets weeded. People are there. We nurture it, and we take care of it.
Have to weed the roof. I like that.
We do. We weed the roof.
Speaking
I've
of
seen deer on it too.
Oh, dear. Speaking of weeding, Louise.
Yeah, I have a part of my question is speaking to the and gardens part of the presentation. Can you tell us anything about? Your before pictures were amazing of how
What it looked like. Yeah, it's dramatic, isn't it?
How did he choose what plants to put in? Did he have advisors or?
It's a lot of this was intuitive. It was very intuitive. He just had this idea for this landscape by using the native plants. He edited nature a lot. He let it thrive. It is very remarkable. I mean, people, we have landscape architecture groups come. I mean, there's lessons to learn. It was really a very much, an experiment and a demonstration of how we can live in harmony with nature, not dominated, not manipulated too much, but just really. No, that I'm not exactly sure exactly how that was done. I think some of that was there, and he encouraged it. And some of the features were made, some of the views, by just creating framed views and things like that. So it was very much an editing process.
He was able to create sort of stepping, like, staircase, quote unquote, that looked just like they were from nature. You could hardly
with the
tell
stones, he wanted things to be, he wanted the stairs, everything like that, the terraces, to look like they were part from the thing. Right, so this also comes from his set design background too. So the whole place, it's people just can't believe it's a designed environment, because he did such a masterful job of making it look like it was from nature.
Back there?
Yeah, I noticed, I was struck by the picture of the kitchen, where there was the whole lineup of pots.
Yes, yeah, well, that's a good question. That isn't normally there. That was a wonderful donation that a collector gave us. And so I take them out sometimes for special tours and things like that. It just happened to be the best picture I had of the kitchen. But when it's staged to look like when in his lifetime, those are not there, because I don't think that was something he would have done. He wouldn't have lined them up like that. But that's a really good observation. They just look so colorful and so nice, and they also are of a particular line. It's every color and pattern of that line. So it's kind of it was a wonderfully curated gift. And sometimes it's just, you can't resist.
Did he ever go back to the stage after he became a success?
That was it. He was in Rochester working for George Cukor, and that was the end of his theatrical work. I mean, the output is prolific. I mean, I don't think he would have even had time to think about it. It's actually staggering. And when you visit Manitoga and see the design gallery, it's filled with such variety, so many different lines and ideas and things. It's still unfolding for me after 20 years. There's no like strict diary, but there are, I mean, we do have some of his papers, and we can find things. Sometimes they're like lists of things that he would buy, or that kind of thing. His main archives are in Syracuse, the special collections, the Bird Library. We have a small archive of things, but that's where the main archive is.
Well, we can't wait to come visit.
Oh, well, I hope so.
Thank you.
Thank you so
And
much.
without further ado, why don't we pull some prizes? Vivian, why don't you be our So, David, how many names are we pulling? 5. Ooh, your odds are good. All right, let's see. Meg, Michael. Where is she? I saw her. I know she's here. You didn't go in the bucket without having. So Meg is 1, right over there. Frederick Jacobs. All right, over there. 3 more. I feel like I should be spinning a wheel or doing something dramatic up here. Oh, Holly Weiss. Yeah, there she is. Great. Robin Roman. Back there. And the last, drum roll. And Kathleen O'Brien. So thank you all for coming. Thank you for a wonderful visual tour. I want to encourage you all to visit Manitoga, especially when the weather gets nicer. Spring and fall is the time to visit. Is it open year round? May to November is the time to visit. So we have a few snacks back in the room, and I hope we see you next week for Villa Luara. Thank you all.